In today's episode, I'll be giving my review and reaction to the second season of Star Wars plus Disney Plus's Andor. So let's dive right into Andor Season 2. Do something, man. People are questioning you. Shut up. Shut up. Okay, yep, do that. Sure, guys. Stupid and dumb. Just an idiot. Get your shit together, son. Fuck it. I loved it. Welcome to the dub cast. Coming into season 2 of Andor, I was pretty excited, I have to say. I'm pretty sure if I had to pick a favorite Star Wars show, it would be Andor. Andor has some of the most memorable season 1 moments where you have One Way Out as being a standout television episode that might be the best episode of a show I've seen in the past couple years. You have the heist sequence, you have Mon Mothma's monologue, you have Luthen's monologue, you have Marvin's monologue, you have Andy Serkis' character's monologue, Kino's monologue. It's crazy, bro. I think I sent the same person twice in there, but this show has provided some of the best standalone moments, some of the best, rebellion moments, and I love Rogue One. I think Rogue One is a top 3 Star Wars movie for me as well, so I'm super excited coming into Andor Season 2, and for the most part, I don't think this season disappointed at all. I think Andor is the peak of Star Wars television, to be honest. You can tell, I think it's been 3 years since 2.5 years since the first season came out. You can tell they took their time with this one. They do the time jumps from every couple episodes, but I like how they're ending it here. We go right to the beginning of Rogue One from the end of season 2 of Andor. So I think that was pretty good, the way they did that, because you're not overextending yourself. And they don't force a bunch of characters on us like we end up seeing K2SO in the last arc. I know people love the Clone Wars arcs of the different episodes. I think that arcs in this season provided like a good segue as well. And that was a strong suit of the first season too. We had a couple episodes in the heist. You have a couple episodes in the prison. Like, I think that helps aid the show and the storytelling aspect of it. I think one small criticism, is we're a little bit too overextended with different characters, but I do appreciate them trying to show us different angles of everyone involved in this rebellion and how it came to be. Everyone on the Imperial side as well, from Dedra, Partagats, and Director Krennic and Cyril. Their story too is important. So I think this season 2 was masterful as well. I will say I think season 1 was slightly better, but Star Wars, we're back. Andor, we're back, especially coming off a couple of rough shows from Star Wars, mostly The Acolyte, but I didn't watch Skeleton Crew yet. There will probably be a review on Skeleton Crew, but we're back to form with Andor Season 2. We're here. Diego Luna, standout job, and he's not even the main character in some of these episodes. So as usual, I'll be going episode by episode, breaking down what I saw here. So a little bit different for this review is I kind of separated my notes for each character and their sort of story within the episode. So, for example, episode 1, I'll be talking about Andor's story, and then I'll move on to Luthen's story, and then I'll move on to, there's kind of different scenes all playing out, so I think it's kind of although a lot of shows do this one specifically has, these are the storylines, so I didn't jump around, I just put them in the same thing, so we can kind of follow that character's story for that episode, and then we can, if things mix, I do get into that, but starting it out, we have episode 1 titled 1 Year Later. So this is 1 year later after the end of season 1, where we saw the rebellion effort on Ferrix with Marva's death and her speech at the end. So we're right back with Andor. He is stealing a very upgraded TIE fighter from the test facility. Of course, not without trouble in classic Andor fashion. I do like his little conversation with the other person who was working on this base. She's a little bit scared about going through with this plan, helping him. She might die, but he's like, this is for a greater good. And I appreciate seeing that out of Andor, where season 1, he was a little bit more hesitant about the rebellion. This season's more about, the different divisions of the rebellion and, your level of commitment. But I did appreciate that little conversation. So now he lands and is surrounded by people in the forest. They don't trust him, and they still don't really end up trusting him by the end of it. He reveals that he has been helping supply them this whole time. The Rebel Alliance has been helping support these people out in the woods. They didn't really believe him, though. They still, held him in captivity. That's a little bit later on, but they have a lot of dissension in their own ranks, and one shoots another, causing a gunfight to break out. I believe that was like around the end of the episode. So that was Andor's little episode 1 plot. Luthen, he makes his way to Mon Mothma's daughter's wedding for a quote-unquote surprise. We saw Mon Mothma have to, marry her child to someone that she wasn't really willing to, but for the politics of it all and to gain some money in her accounts that were being watched by the Empire. So we learned Tay Kolma is living separately from his wife and wants to discuss the Foundation. He's that sort of side character that was good friends with Mon Mothma growing up, but is kind of falling out of, not love, but falling out of what she's interested in. They're kind of going two separate ways. So that's the start of this little arc here. And Mon's kid has her first fight with the chosen husband for her. Arranged marriages obviously are very tough because you don't really love the person you're arranged with, right? You're just kind of there with that person. So I don't know. I don't think that's going to end up mattering. But yeah, that was something that happened. So the last storyline is Krennic. He's doing a presentation in front of Dedra and her superior, Partigons, about Goodman, which is an important texture, or Ghorman, who has an important texture to the Empire that's autocorrect. Sorry, guys. And they need to have a strong hand in enforcing their rule. And the planet in general could be in trouble if they end up mining, so they need to figure out a plan in order to get the mines in and be able to, get the product they need in order for this project that they're building. Obviously, it ends up being the Death Star. I wasn't even keen to this when it was happening, but, solid first episode. I think the people in the forest arc, now looking back, and I forgot that happened, it was kind of a little bit, probably the worst arc of the season, but it happened at the beginning, so here we go. As usual, I'll give my favorite and least favorite of each episode. Favorite, episode 1, obviously going to Andor, just being a beast and trying to unite the group together and tell them they're being idiots. They don't listen, but good job, Andor. Least favorite, I'm going Krennic, being evil as usual and potentially putting a planet of 800,000 people at risk. Yeah, Ghorman has 800,000 people, and we will see Ghorman become, a big hub later on in the season. So that'll wrap up episode 1. Episode 2 is titled Sagrona Teema. So for Andor's continued story out in the middle of the wilderness, his group tries to find some food. They're split now because one side of the people out there are against the other side of the people. As I mentioned before, there's a little bit of a dissension in ranks there. So the people that Andor are with find a boot of one of the soldiers with the leg still in it. There's also these mythical creatures who are running about the forest. Now there is infighting within the infighting as the other group tries to turn the laser from the new TIE fighter that Andor flew to the forest onto Andor's group. And Andor capitalizes on them playing a weird version of rock, paper, scissors, which I guess was how they were going to figure out this conflict. Also, the beast comes through the middle of the forest. So through capitalizing to this, he knocks out the guard, gets in the TIE fighter, and gets out on the TIE fighter. So that wraps up Andor's story. In Dedra's land, she's going to have to take the Ghorman job as kind of her superior. Partigans kind of forces her to take the job. And also leave behind the Access Project, which is aka known as the Hunt for Luthen. Cyril is back training a new colleague at the Standards job, and him and Dedra are actually together. So interesting dynamic there, romantic relationship between Cyril and Dedra. Back on the Senate side of things, Tay got too drunk the first night of the wedding and had to be taken home. Major rookie move, brother. I don't even know what to say about this 3-night wedding and you're too drunk in the first night. I mean, I don't know what the drunk standards are in Star Wars world, but that's pretty sad that you're already out of the picture after the first night. He mentioned being undervalued with his contributions, and this is very concerning to Luthen. This new development of Tay feeling like he is being undervalued, and Luthen and Mon Mothma have a conversation during the wedding. Of course, Mon Mothma's daughter is getting married during this whole situation, so it's kind of awkward to watch this play out because they have to kind of sneakily talk to each other. Last storyline of this episode is Bix. She's on the run, living on a crop field with Wilman and Brasso, and she gets pursued by the lieutenant of the inspection coming to visit on the different crop fields. He's trying to make a romantic swing at her, which obviously fails. She mentions Andor, her husband, is off-world and is coming back soon. We'll see if that deters him. One of the creepier arcs of the season. So my favorite from this episode was Andor. Once again, the smartest person there, and was able to escape during the infighting and just capitalizing on mistakes. Least favorite was the creepy lieutenant creeping on Bix and trying to get her to go out with him. I thought that was really uncomfortable. So that'll wrap up episode 2. Episode 3 is titled Harvest and is the end of our first 3-episode arc. So on Bix's world, the Empire is closing in on their district. Her and Brasso have to form a fake emergency work order in order to leave the planet. Andor learns about this through the communications of the planet. There was like a little blockade on the thing while they're doing the inspection, so he wasn't able to get the full message. They weren't able to communicate with each other. He arrives on the home planet just as Bix and the rest of the people hustle to escape. The creepy guy is back trying to pursue Bix and knows that Bix is here illegally, which is interesting that he didn't do anything about it the first time, but he does something about it this time. He basically tries to rape her, and she hits him with the tools, wounding him fatally, luckily, so RIP to hit that guy. Not really, fuck him. Andor comes in clutch, wiping out the inspection crew with the new TIE fighter, and it looks like, unfortunately, in the wreckage, Brasso has passed away. So, as to be expected with this season, most of the characters we know that aren't in Rogue One, they aren't going to make it. So, unfortunately, Brasso, that's a true RIP. RIP to Brasso. He was a beast on Ferrix and a great part of the rebellion. We'll miss you, brother. In Mon Mothma's world, she warns her daughter that she doesn't need to go through with the wedding if she doesn't want to, and that upsets the daughter. It was a weird story of Mon Mothma being like, at my wedding, my mom was drunk, and, I wish she told me I didn't have to go through with it, kind of alluding to her and her husband being on rocky terms to her daughter, which is maybe what upset her daughter. But yeah, these arranged marriages, I don't think I'm a fan of arranged marriages, but sometimes they do work out. Who am I to judge? The party continues. Luther is still panicking and maybe references Tay needing to be taken out of the picture. And maybe Mon Mothma does agree to this as she sends Tay out to his death, essentially, as her sister Vel recognizes the driver. I forget her name. She'll come back later in the season, but yeah, essentially Tay is going to be taken out to pasture due to his concerns with the rebellion, Mon Mothma, Luthen, the whole bit. So another one that's gone in this episode. Tay will not be continuing on with us. So the last arc, or the last story in this episode, is Dedra and her side of things. So Dedra and Cyril have dinner with Cyril's mother, a standout character from season 1. This is what they were so scared of. They keep talking about being like scared of something that was going to happen. It's just dinner with Cyril's mother. Dedra gives it to her when Cyril takes a little break from dinner. She's like, stop causing so much anxiety, and Cyril, you're only going to come when we ask you to come, and like, please just leave us alone. You're way too much. And the mother takes it decently well. She doesn't storm out or anything. She's just like, all right, I guess so. And Dedra will make sure that Cyril visits, but she cannot provide anxiety. And also, she finds out that Uncle Harlow, who Cyril's mother kept mentioning in season 1, is a criminal. So the model example of the family is a criminal. We've been sold a lie from Cyril's family. So that was a funny scene. And, unfortunately, this might be this isn't the last interaction between Cyril and his mother. Favorite from this episode, I'm giving to Andor once again. Clutched up for the squad, saving the day and killing the inspection team after coming home for his family. Least favorite, Lieutenant Rapey again. Goodbye. He was even worse of a piece of shit than first even imagined in episode 2. So that'll wrap up episode 3 in our first arc. Episode 4 is titled Ever Been to Ghorman? ? This episode starts with another 1-year time jump, so we're past the first 3 episodes onto our next arc, and this one continues with a bunch of storylines, starting with Bix. She is still having a rough go of it, was tortured at the end of season 1, and now she's having a rough go of it with the person she had to kill, and not just the Lieutenant Rapey guy, but also there was another innocent soldier. Well, not innocent, he's working for the Empire, but another soldier she had to kill. Andor has a different mindset about it. It had to be done. I think Andor mentions it was a struggle at first for him too, and he still thinks about all the people he killed, but in order for this to get done, people will have to die, so it is what it is. Luthen tasks Andor with going to Ghorman and getting a scope of things, seeing what will work. Andor's not sure if he wants to go yet. He's going to talk it through with Bix. He wants to be with Bix. He doesn't want to listen to Luthen. Luthen and Andor's relationship continues to be somewhat rocky. So Cyril, he's actually on world in Ghorman, away from his mother. People are listening in on him and his mother speak. His mother fits or goes right for the Empire propaganda, believes everything they say. She's listening to Fox News guys, and taking it for real. Well, Cyril also believes it as well, but he has to like pretend like he's not. So the people listening in on him believe that he could potentially be a rebel, help for them, and the rebels do interact with him, giving him a spider at a market with a meeting time, and he's excited that it's them. And he goes to the meeting and actually fits in somewhat decently. He's going to have a couple of phone calls with Dedra back and forth about this. Speaking of Dedra, in this episode, she and her crew have a meeting. The rebel plan is falling behind. Her replacement is doing very well at the Axis project, and Lonnie is able to relay this info to Luthen that Dedra is the one working Ghorman, and there's something going on there. So one of the only Lonnie interactions we see this season. He's kind of more of a background character in this season. Mon, in her world, tries to rally votes to help Ghorman, but is unable to. Not a lot of people are ready to sign up for the rebellion yet. There hasn't been a lot of action happening on Ghorman that it makes them want to do it. Even the Ghorman senators, like, I'm not interested in what you have to say, bro. Sorry. It's unfortunate for Mon, Maybe she'll get some help soon. Saw Gerrera is someone that exists. Glad to see him back in the fold. He's with Willman now and essentially forces him to make the entrance that he wants. Saw Gerrera is not the most pleasant person to deal with. He's kind of a little bit rough on the edges. Not really a great person to just have interactions with, because he's just going to force you to do what he wants you to do, and that's it. There's no really back and forth there. That wraps up this episode. Favorite of this episode, I'm giving it to Bix. Seems like this is foreshadowing for Bix and Andor not being together again. So if this is it, sad to see them go. She was just trying to enjoy her time with Andor. Luckily, I was wrong about that, but still giving it to Bix. Least favorite, Saw Gerrera. Overall a beast character, but I thought he just could have been nicer in his interaction with Willman. So that'll wrap up episode 4. Episode 5 is titled I Have Friends Everywhere. So with Andor's storyline, this episode, he is going to finally agree to go to Ghorman under the guidance of Bix, and, Luthen obviously tasked him to do it, but Bix is like, it's okay if you go. I thought this was going to be the end of it, but luckily there's still some more scenes between Andor and Bix. Andor is confronted by the daughter of the person who's named Rylance. He's sort of I believe he's some sort of minister within Ghorman, and he's sort of the leader of the rebellion there. Andor warns her to proceed with caution. Don't let outside influencers come into this, even though he is an outside influencer. I don't think he said that actually, but he's kind of just like, you got to take it slow here. You can't be like too rash. You got to think about what you're doing. And then he has a bad interaction with Rylance, and ultimately the meeting ends bad after he lets them know their information that they have, maybe some sort of setup, which it is, and it's bad information, so probably not going to operate here. Cyril, his office is swept for listening devices within Ghorman. They do find the bug within his office. Obviously, the people below, the Rebel Alliance, is listening to Cyril's office. So there's like a big scramble of them trying to get rid of their bug. Cyril's like fake freaking out. He knows it's already there. And then the rebellion finds out about his history, how he used to be an ISB officer and was taken off due to the exertion of his forces looking for Andor. And the Rebel Alliance wants him to give them some sort of files that they have on incoming shipments so they can do a robbery, and he does cooperate and give them the files they want. This is all part of the plan, because Dedra's like, this is in the previously on every episode. Dedra's saying we need a group of rebels with bad intentions, and this is what they want in order to, do their plan of just basically annihilating the people of Ghorman so they can get the materials they need for the Death Star. So Cyril does give up the files to that little rebel group, and then Dedra had him followed back home, which Cyril didn't like. The escalation between Dedra and Cyril is definitely rising, starting with this Ghorman arc here. Not the most peaceful relationship. Next, we have Luthen's story this episode. So he pays a visit to Bix. Obviously, Andor's off-world in Ghorman. He was going to offer something, but then he doesn't, which is the classic, like, I'm going to offer it to you anyway. And then warns her about the drug she's been taking. You know, she's still having problems with her PTSD from the torture treatment she got in season 1. So he's like, hey, maybe, you know, don't do this drug and don't become addicted. I don't know. I think maybe that did help because I don't think she does take the drug anymore. But that's maybe due to another incident that happened. So his assistant, Luthen, is worried about the bug they have with Skolden since there is a forgery. Obviously, they're listening into everything. So there's this one piece that they have the bug on, but since there's a forgery within the Skolden's art collection, they're going to have to take everything out and check all of them for forgeries, which, you know, seems a little bit like nitpicking, but, you know, rich Star Wars people, who am I to judge? So last one we have is picking up with Saw and Willman again. So Saw Gerrera was actually planning on getting rid of Willman, but decides against it for now. Instead, he kills the person Willman was training, as they were supposedly a traitor and giving everything to the Empire. And then at the end, Saw makes Willman breathe in the Rhydo air, whatever that means. I was really confused by this Rhydo air stuff. Like, it seemed like Willman actually was struggling to breathe, so I'm not sure if this was some sort of, you know, gas or like weird air to breathe. It seemed like it was, so I don't really know what was going on there. Maybe someone could provide some context in the comments. That was probably the one part of the season that was pretty confusing to me. So, favorite of this episode, I'm giving to Saw Gerrera. Not really a strong choice for favorite, so I just went with Saw Gerrera because he was kind of hyped this episode. Least favorite, I'm giving to Luthen. Just thought he was moving weirdly this episode and kind of crashed out on the assistant there, who I'm forgetting her name. What is it? Clea. He crashes out on Clea, so I didn't like that. Luthen gets my least favorite for episode 5. Episode 6 is titled What a Festive Evening. Now, Andor, coming off of his journey to Ghorman, is picked up by Luthen. Andor is pretty bullish on Ghorman. He doesn't, or bearish, I think. Bearish. He doesn't think it's going to be a good spot for Revolution. Luthen is bullish. Sorry. Luthen is bullish on it. Andor is bearish. Andor doesn't think it's going to be good. Luthen still thinks this could be a good spot. So they return back to Coruscant, and then Andor visits Luthen at the shop after finding out that he wanted Bix to do a job, like we saw in the last episode. And Luthen says, you know, Andor, you got to get it together, or she's too big of a problem. Now, I don't know if I agree with that. You know, revolutions are built on love, and I feel like Luthen's going too hard here to be like, get her out of the picture. Like, Bix could help. You know, we see later on what happens. So I think Bix could be an asset, but obviously, you know, things happen that are sad. So speaking of Bix, her and Andor are able to put Dr. Gorst in the same system she was tortured in, and so she leaves him to be tortured like the way she was, and then Andor blows the building up. So that was a sweet end to the episode for Andor and Bix's story there. Got revenge on Dr. Gorst. Meanwhile, Vel and Cinta are assigned to the Ghorman robbery mission, these files that Cyril provided, and of course they make out. They're, you know, I feel like I don't remember this storyline specifically well because it was, I don't know. Cinta wasn't here for like this season, so we don't really, I don't know. I feel like she, besides driving Tay, quote unquote driving, she wasn't really a part of this season. So it's kind of hard to remember her and Vel's backstory. But good to see them in love. Obviously, you know, with Star Wars, love always is bad. Cyril is watching the robbery mission at every step. He's like in a faraway building with binoculars. Like, bro, get a job, do something with your life. You know, that's the problem with Cyril, is he's so wrapped up in this Imperial, like he's obsessed with it. That's what becomes his downfall. Anyways, Cinta is shot by a spare shot when two people are arguing over a gun. Two of the rebels, they're idiots, and then Cinta is shot and Cinta dies. So real sad to see Cinta go here. Another character to add to the list of sad deaths along the way. Finally, we have Mon Mothma at a party for one of the Senate. You know, they just do mad parties. I think her husband said they were going to like 10 parties in one night. There's mad drama happening at this party. Luthen and Kleya are trying to get this microphone out of the piece in Skolden's gallery. Mon Mothma is also in attendance, and Kleya uses Lonnie to try and get the mic out, which is a big deal for Lonnie because he's like, no, I don't want to do this, but it looks fine to everybody else. I don't think there's even any repercussions from this. So interesting scene here at the party with all the director Krennic there in attendance, and kind of being a little bit suspect of them, but never really having a true idea what was going on. So favorite of this episode, I'm giving to Bix. Got her revenge on Dr. Gorst. I thought maybe she'd be back after this episode in good form, but not really. But least favorite goes to Krennic. Bad vibes with Mon Mothma. They were kind of going back and forth too, arguing. And also everyone else involved with that, Luthen and everyone in that little group at the party. And it was funny to see him with Luthen, who is a big reason that Krennic has his has his rightful downfall in Rogue One. So that'll wrap up episode 6. Episode 7 is titled Messenger, and once again, 1 year later, another time jump into this arc of episodes. So we start this episode off with Wilman. He is reunited with Bix and Andor. Luthen reaches out to Andor's ability to work after being hurt. There's some back and forth in that. Andor's like, I just want to hang out with Bix. I don't need to be working all the time. And Luthen's like, we're in a fucking revolution, dude. You got to help us out. Wilman, we find out, was on Ghorman, and he has scoped out Dedra Meero as a potential target for Andor. And in the meantime, Bix is trying to get Andor to visit a Force healer. She thinks this could help him with it. He has like a bullet wound on his shoulder that's not healing at all. So she thinks that the Force healer could potentially help him. And this is a weird interaction with the Force healer. There's a lot of this type of stuff in Star Wars where the Force healer touches him and says that he is a messenger and there's some place he needs to be, obviously alluding to the fact that he'll be pretty much the key in this whole revolution, starting by getting the Death Star plans on the planet where they go. I forget the name of it, and him and Jen Erso. So good foreshadowing there, and a good callback to Rogue One. Vel comes to talk to Bix to try and rein in Andor after Andor takes a personal trip to Ghorman to follow on Luthen's orders, and this sets up shot, and he starts setting up shot for the potential assassination attempt of Dedra Meero. So once again, you have you start to see the rebel leader come in and be like, what are you going, where are you going, Andor? Like, they're starting to become much more organized. You can't just go on rogue missions anymore, but Luthen's still operating that kind of rogue mission mindset. So that's where the clash comes in from Vel trying to get Bix to rein him in. So we'll see if Andor's able to get this assassination attempt off. Meanwhile, there's chaos on Ghorman. Imperial deaths. They impose a curfew. The revolution, obviously 1 year in, is becoming a lot more violent, and results are starting to happen of what they're trying to go for. So the plan from the higher ups to essentially destroy the planet is still going through, and they're bringing in another person to help Dedra out with it, and Cyril is still looking out for her. He's upset about not knowing what's going on outside of his personal duties with this. Dedra keeps a lot in her back pocket. She's obviously a much higher ranking officer than Cyril. Cyril's like still at the bottom of the bottom because he had that big incident in season 1. But she tells him to pack up and be ready to go, which is a key thing to remember for Cyril. But obviously he doesn't listen, and he goes to try and talk to Enza about outside agitators and gets slapped in the face. So Cyril, down bad really just before, but not great for Cyril. Mon, meanwhile, this episode gets recognized for her energy and trying to protect Ghorman. We saw a couple episodes she tried to help out Ghorman. Now that it's actually in turmoil and conflict, that guy comes back to her and is like, hey, you were actually right about everything. Thanks for what you were trying to do. I'm just an idiot. So favorite of this episode, I'm going Wilman. Inspires Andor to head out to Ghorman to carry out the assassination attempt, also helping Andor accomplish this. And he's going to help him set up the assassination attempt. Least favorite goes to Cyril. Just thought he was being way too pushy and inserting himself, where he'd definitely be better off just actually listening to Dedra and going home, but it's Cyril. So that'll wrap up episode 7. Episode 8 is titled Who Are You? So a very important episode, probably the best episode of the season. We start this episode out with the Empire has landed mining rings and is building barricades on Ghorman. There's a huge gathering in the Memorial Square. orders were to fire at will from the Empire, which Jedha does enforce. And they snipe their own men in the crowd to cause a riot. It's pretty sad to watch here. I mean, just manipulation by Jedha causing a fake rebellion. This incites the battle between Ghor citizens and Imperial forces, and then they bring in the K2SO droids. It's over, man. They start throwing them everywhere. Enza, another lost soldier in the wreckage, RIP Enza. So, two other storylines happening. Rylance is privy to it being a trap for the Ghor to fight. They're all marching off, and he's like, guys, stop. This is obviously a trap by the Empire to get us to fight with them so they can kill us. And he confronts Cyril for his action in helping this happen. He's on to him. He clocks him basically as being the one to kind of set up this revolution the way it happened. Cyril is thrown into a room with the droids to be safe. You know, they tell him, don't move, don't go anywhere. Of course, he runs up to Jedha and confronts her about him not knowing about what's going on. She still knows obviously what's going on. She has a lot of knowledge. And then when she doesn't really tell him what's going on, he chokes her and starts getting the information, which I thought was pretty cringy. You know, Cyril's, I feel like, just a nice guy, but he's like overextending himself and being an asshole sometimes, and it just doesn't work. So obviously this will be their last ever interaction together. Is, you know, Jedha and Cyril choke. That's it. No, I mean, nobody cares about them, but yeah, sad ending to their story. Andor, meanwhile, is also still on Ghorman. Remember, he's coming to set up the assassination attempt on Jedha. He has a nice interaction with the hotel worker, who I didn't mention before, but when he checked into his hotel in Ghorman earlier in the season, he had this bellhop who kind of let him know the story about why there's the memorial. Moff Tarkin just landed a ship on a bunch of civilians, and that's why there's the memorial. Then they escalate the conflict by building on top of the memorial, so he's like secretly in the rebellion. And he says rebellions are built on hope, so that was a nice quote there. And Andor spends most of this episode pretty much just waiting on a clean shot at Jedha, which he doesn't get until the last moment where he has a clear shot. And of course, who's there to save Jedha? Cyril tackles him in the last moment. He then gets impacted by a grenade. Him and Andor are both impacted by a grenade. In the shuffle, Cyril gets the upper hand. He's about to shoot Andor, and he says, Andor's like, who are you? But this has been Cyril's whole life goal since season 1, episode 1, tracking him down for the murder in the bar. But no, Andor's saved because Rylance shoots Cyril in the head. So R.I.P. Cyril. Not really, though. I didn't really care about Cyril, but he goes out here. Pretty good death episode for him. Pretty impactful. A couple scenes this episode. I thought this was a really good episode. Willman is simping pretty hard. He's also on Ghorman, remember, setting up the assassination attempt for Andor, but he can't leave his girl behind. And then Andor has helped out. There's a million people on Ghorman that I don't know the names of, I'm sorry, but one of them drives like a truck into one of the K2SO droids, splitting them in half. So they, of course, take the robot with them, starting the K2SO arc. And there's sad music and scene of Drina explaining what happened with the massacre at Palmo. Drina is the girl that Willman's with. She's kind of a helper of the Ghorman rebellion. So she's on the radio explaining to everyone what happened before they cut her off. And, you know, it's pretty devastating audio. And then Cyril's mother, we see at the end of the episode, grieving the loss of Cyril. Pretty sad moment for her. Lost her son, you know. He moved away to Ghorman and never came back. So last we'll see of Cyril's mother and Cyril in this episode 8. So favorite of this episode, gotta go Andor. I think, once again, it was a pretty hard episode to choose a favorite because it's the people of Ghor just rising up and against the Empire, which is respectable, but there's no specific one person. Too many to choose from. Andor will add this to his collection of being part of a rebellion and uprise one day against the Empire and lead the charge. So I'm going to go on Andor for favorite of this episode. And also him saying, who are you, to Sarah was funny. Least favorite, Jedha. Just thought she was absolutely heartless and massacred thousands of people for the Empire. You know, I can't respect that at all, so fuck Jedha. That'll wrap up episode 8. Episode 9 is titled Welcome to the Rebellion. So we have a bunch of different storylines happening in this episode, starting it out with the Ghorman senator. We see who Mon Mothma tried to help. Obviously, after the events of episode 8, he is now taken into custody after being pretty loud and aggressive about the actions that happened on his planet. This is obviously to the dismay of Mon Mothma. She finds a listening device in her office and is informed by Luthen that Bail Organa's team is corrupted. So in the lieu of this, Luthen also tells her that her assistant has been working for her or for Luthen for years, so she dismisses him. And that feels like pretty shallow considering you're part of the rebellion too. And I mean, the disconnect between, I know it's meant to be kind of a thematic messaging where all the different levels of the rebellion can get on the same page. That's why it kind of took so long. And Rogue One and A New Hope, where they were finally able to all help each other out, and that's why they were able to do it. But it's frustrating watching Luthen and like Mon Mothma's side of things just be different. Because if they just got on the same page, they'd be doing pretty well. So thought that was a shallow move by Mon Mothma. The big moments of this episode is her speech that she's going to give. Bail Organa is going to give her the floor, and then she's going to come after the people or help out the people of Ghorman after that massacre, because no one's really saying what actually happened. They're hiding it with propaganda and all that. So she's practicing, she's nervous, but she gives her speech, great monologue. I'm sure it'll be another YouTube video that gets like millions of views because it was a great speech. And she calls that a massacre on Ghorman, and Emperor Palpatine a monster who will come for them all soon enough. Warning out there, she did tell y'all, but no one's really trying to listen, so they gotta evacuate her out super fast or else she's gonna be in trouble in the Senate building. So before this, Andor is having conversation with Luthen. He says he's quote unquote done, or I think this was talking to Kleya, and Kleya's like, what do you mean done? We're never done until we're free. Or it was a good conversation where he's like, I just want to make my own decisions. She was like, that's literally what we're fucking fighting for, dude. So that was funny, but also respectable. And yeah, obviously Andor's not going to be done, so this is just Cab. The Imperials have listening devices on certain senators, so we get to spend some time with the Imperial Control Center. They're kind of watching over things from their point of view, and they see that Mons has gone out, and also it's confirmed. It's been like a season and a half long speculation by both Mon and everybody that her driver works for the Imperials and the Empire, which is confirmed in this episode. So finally, the big shebang of this episode is Andor's mission to extract Mon Mothma. There is another team ready to extract Mon Mothma with unclear intentions. This is the team working for Bail Organa. So obviously, Luthen warned about this team being corrupted, and yep, we find there is a bad actress among them. It's two men and a woman, and the woman shoots one of the guys, and she holds Andor and Mon Mothma at gunpoint once they go out of their little chamber. Andor shoots her, and then also shoots Mon Mothma's driver. R.I.P. to the driver. He was like a long-running storyline there. So 2 more people dead, and they make it back to Kleya and Luthen in their little secret apartment in Coruscant. So we learn Wilman and Drina did make it off of Ghorman, so that was pretty good. Andor just wants to be with Bix once again, and this is the toughest scene to watch of the season probably. Bix has to unfortunately alert Andor she's going to leave him for the better of the rebellion because she's becoming a distraction for him, and she just needs to be out of the picture, off-world, doing her own thing, let him do his, and she'll find him after it's over. An unfortunate sentence knowing what happens down the line. And we have the last scene of this episode is Andor is informed that the droid they saved on Ghorman is put back together, and they don't know what it's going to do. It could potentially be rogue or go against them or just still be working for the Empire. They have about 15 guns painted on the droid, and K2SO wakes up with Andor pointing a gun right at its head, and then he's like, hey, maybe you shouldn't point that gun at my head. So obviously the big friendship between Andor and K2SO begins here, so that was exciting to see at the end of this episode 9. So my favorite from this episode was Andor. He beasted in saving Mon in the extraction mission. He has to go through mad hardships to make the rebellion work with Bix, just wanting to spend time with her, but he has to completely watch her walk out the door, and to see how this all affected his mindset eventually in the movie makes sense. Least favorite, the secret ISB chick who was on Bail Organa's team. No one else really had any despicable actions, of my opinion, so she really caused the death of a lot of people that didn't need to die, and she was annoying and cringe throughout the episode. So that'll wrap up episode 9. Episode 10 is titled Make It Stop, and we are 1 year later once again for our last arc before the events leading up to Rogue One. So we start this episode out with a meeting between Lonnie and Luthen. Lonnie has something critical he needs to mention to Luthen. They haven't met in a while. Obviously, we only see them meet one time this season about Dedra Meero. And this critical information he has learned, he's apparently just had Dedra's key code for like 2 years and then found the plans for the Death Star, which we find out later were actually accidentally sent to her. But nonetheless, we leave off that meeting and we come back to it, and Lonnie is dead on the bench. So Luthen must have figured he's too much of a flight risk or something. I don't know. I thought that was a pretty sad part of this ending. Lonnie, another lost soldier. R.I.P. to Lonnie. I don't know why Luthen had to do him like that. Now Dedra visits Luthen at the shop. Big WTF moment. Pretty surprised to see this happen. She brings the original Starpath unit that was a big part of the season 1. I think it was one of the first arcs was Andor trying to steal that Starpath unit and sell it to Luthen. So she brings it right to his shop to catch him. She says, I've been waiting for this moment for years. Obviously working on the Axis project. And she says, like, you disgust me. And he's like, there's a whole galaxy out there to disgust you. I like that quote. And Luthen, instead of giving into custody, he kills him or attempts to kill himself by stabbing himself. And in the back, we see him pouring something down, but we don't really know what he's doing. He was frying the evidence. He knew she was coming. What a beast, Luthen, never going out or doing everything, sacrificing everything for the Empire. Kleya is distraught as Luthen saved her from being killed when she was just a little girl. We have this nice little backstory, this whole episode of Luthen and Kleya's upbringing. He saved her in the middle of a war. She was in like a little bit of a cage or in like an air vent or something in a ship, and he decided to spare her rather than kill her and just leave the war and raise her basically. They also sell a piece when they're together when she's younger, so that was nice to see. They obviously end up owning the antique shop or whatever, so them being able to work together to sell the piece. And she witnesses a public massacre when Luthen's like, we gotta just walk away from this, so that we can kind of see where her inspiration for the rebellion's inspired. And then they also blow up ships from the Empire a couple of years later down the line. Luthen doesn't want her to push the button. He pushes the button and then it's blown up. So nice to see the backstory of Kleya and Luthen. Wasn't something I think I needed to see going into the season, but then actually seeing it on the season, I'm like, oh, that was a fun story. So this last arc was pretty sad, just because a lot of people got to go. So Kleya is now trying to go in and kill Luthen like he ordered her to do, because he, the Imperial / Empire torture devices are crazy. So even if you really, really don't want to say something, they could get it out of you and they'll do crazy shit to you. So it's better to just die. So Kleya now gets the fake nurse clothes on and is going in for the operation to finish Luthen. She goes beast mode to get into his room, kills a couple guards, goes under to the radar, and she does finish him off. So R.I.P. to Luthen, another soldier gone. Respectable guy, Unfortunately, he had to go out this way. Dedra, at the end of the episode, is arrested for causing the raid by herself. They had a plan to do this down the line. There was another person working her post, working Project Axis, but she went ahead and just did it herself because that's what she does. And she's arrested for that and going against orders. So that wraps up episode 10. Favorite from this episode was Luthen, obviously making the ultimate sacrifice and dying for the rebellion, also choosing Kleya over violence growing up. A great story. Their nice little backstory there. Least favorite is going to Dedra, being evil as ever, dense as ever, gets herself arrested. Good job. Good job, Dedra. Idiot. So that'll wrap up episode 10. Episode 11 is titled Who Else Knows? We start this episode out with our good friend, Director Krennic. He has made his way down to Dedra's cell to interrogate her about what she knows about everything. And she was sent the Death Star plans and read them without reporting them. I mean, obviously her and Cyril are like, these characters are just way obsessed with the Imperial / Empire and their job when they just like shouldn't be, because who cares that much about their job? But yeah, that's a violation with reading those reports and not reporting them. But she also makes the correct read to find the assistant, which is Kleya. And she is able to help with the radio frequencies. Obviously, later or in this episode, Kleya is using a makeshift radio because they shut down the comms of Coruscant or whatever. So she has to transmit a signal in a different way. But Dedra is able to kind of help figure that out, which gives them the jump on Kleya. Kleya, this episode is mostly just making that makeshift radio and putting out a call to somebody to pick up. Meanwhile, back on the Rebellion base, Andor and Melshi, good to see Melshi back in the mix, are playing a card game with K2SO, drinking, having a good time. Willman comes in with the radio. This radio, I guess, he's been hiding under his bed, just in case something were to ever happen with Luthen. They think it's from Luthen because they haven't heard the news that Luthen is dead, and they are going to have to hide their effort to leave the planet because there's a lot of dissension. Once I mentioned before, between Luthen's side and the other side on, I believe it's Yavin they're on. And so their plan is to take a quote-unquote test run of a plane to read the message, or go right to Coruscant, I guess. And they pull up to the old apartment where they know whoever it is probably hiding out there. But the Empire is also there at the old apartment, and Kleya is able to relay the info about the Death Star, Jen Erso, and the Kyber, whatever they're using to mine. But she doesn't want to go to Yavin herself because of the differences in opinions there. And that's where we leave off episode 11, kind of a shorter episode just to talk about, but a lot of lead up into this final episode and coming off a big episode in episode 10. So favorite of this episode, I'm giving to Kleya. Hold the line, and she deserves to be favorite for at least one episode. We missed her last episode, so I'm going to give it to her here. Here you are, Kleya, favorite of this episode. Least favorite goes to Dedra, still just sucking ass and being annoying, even though she's in captivity. So that'll wrap up episode 11. Episode 12 is titled Jedha, Kyber, Erso. We start this episode out with K2SO. He savagely kills the Imperials in the ship. They were kind of trying to transmit a radio signal, but then they're gone because K2SO just marked them. And he goes up to the apartment, kills all the people in that way as well, and single-handedly saves them, killing everybody in the Imperial party searching for Andor, including Hirt, the man who is replacing Dedra on the Axis project. So another person down in this slog of killing people. They do successfully extract Kleya back to Yavin. She is hurt after hit by a stun grenade, which was weird because Melshi and Andor are also hit by the stun grenade and not really much happens to them, but Kleya's on life support. But nonetheless, they land on Yavin and are met by a squadron of guns and 2 ships. The Rebel Alliance is taking themselves very, very seriously at this point, so any potential intruders they have to vet. So even though they don't know, or they might know it's Andor, they have to make sure. Andor now comes down and speaks to the Senate contingent. We see Bail Organa. Also, I forgot to mention the Bail Organa recast. I don't mind it as much. Obviously, if the actor doesn't have time to do it, we're gonna have to recast, so people are probably freaking out about that. I did like how they kind of just soft launched that, and in preparation for people backlashing later. So the Senate down there, it's Mon Mothma, they have Bail Organa and a couple other senators. They're kind of the ones running this whole rebellion alliance now on Yavin, and Andor is speaking to them about the Death Star, and they don't initially believe him. I mean, even Mon Mothma is a little bit skeptical of him. They believe he's now being played by the ISB. This just is some Cold War shit where you don't know if the information you're receiving is correct, if the person giving it to you is also being manipulated by the other side. They think the ISB is playing at this, but I mean, eventually they're going to figure out it's not. So he's given the orders to find Tivik on Jedha by Bail Organa, which is a surprise given, they don't really trust Andor at this point. And that's and I think that's the initial mission we see Andor on, is going to save Tivik on Jedha. So in Rogue One, so nice lead up there. Mon Mothma, in the meantime, is speaking to Saw Gerrera. They're in disagreement about Saw's actions. This continues into Rogue One. I believe they are still in disagreement at that point. She has Vel spy on Andor, see what he's up to, and Vel asks for Andor to reconnect with Bix, and also Vel takes in Kleya. Kleya is just waking up on Yavin and walking around in the rain. I don't know what the point of that was. Maybe she's a little bit depressed, but Vel takes her in and talks to her a little bit, so that was nice to see from Vel and Kleya. Actually, I wonder what the fate of Kleya and Vel are post this episode, because they are 2 people who make it out. Speaking of someone who won't make it out, we're back with Partagats, and he's just listening to the original manifesto from the kid who's in Black Mirror in season 1 who died. So I guess that was his manifesto being read out to the people. He's listening to that and being it's everywhere, we failed, essentially, because they are about to fail pretty hard. So he, after all of his missions have gone awry, Dedra's in jail, Hirt is dead, and Kleya escaped. Partagans, instead of going downstairs to the people who are waiting to talk to him and most likely like torture him or just interrogate him. He shoots himself, and he's listening to Lonnie speak about the rebellion. I think that was Lonnie speaking the manifesto. Ending it off, we have the finale of where we're going to be at before Rogue One. So Wilman and Mon are enjoying breakfast in Yavin, the day-to-day rebellion life. Mon's old husband is with another woman now, drinking in a ship. Obviously, they separated after Mon dipped the rebellion, and he was never really down for the cause like that, so I hope at least Mon's daughter is doing well in her marriage. Clea is in Yavin happy, so that's good to see. There was a lot of lead up to this of her being kind of salty at the other side and then being salty at her, so good to see her in Yavin happy. Dedra is still in Imperial jail, probably will be there the rest of her life. The Force healer shares a look with Andor, right before he's going on his mission, so sign of things to come there. Saw Gerrera looks on Jedha. Krennic watches the construction of the Death Star, and the saddest part of this all is Bix having a baby, which is assumed to be Andor's, and B2 Emo are on a farming planet and looking on, smiling. Andor will never get to fucking meet that kid, man. Such a sad ending, but the rebellion had to be done to overthrow this terrible empire. So my favorite of the last episode of Andor is Andor saved the day once again and is destined to save the galaxy. Least favorite, Dedra, stupid, got you in jail. Go cry more, lady. So yeah, man, that's Andor season 2. Fun ride. I feel like I might get clowned on this review because I don't know. I'm not like deep into the Star Wars lore, so I always feel a little bit less confident talking about Star Wars, but it was a fun ride. Like season 1 and 2 are great. I would have season 1 a step above season 2, just because I think some of the arcs in season 2 weren't that great, or were great but not as great as season 1. But this is definitely added this to my favorite shows list on Andor. I believe it's like borderline top 10. I think this is on TV time, not Andor list. I don't know what I'm saying. Andor's top 10 on TV time. I think this is a great show. Definitely all Star Wars fans should check this one out. And I'm gonna have to hit a Rogue One rewatch. Maybe I'll hit a Rogue One review soon. But yeah, hopefully the Star Wars content continues. I feel like Star Wars has kind of been what Marvel wants to be, but their shows just aren't that good. Like they're not rushing the shows, but like Acolyte was kind of a letdown. We'll have to see about Skeleton Crew. I'm not sure what the next Star Wars show to come out is. Mandalorian and Grogu. I'll cover that movie if it comes out sometime. So expect me to be covering more Star Wars in the future. Not sure if I'll pod about Skeleton Crew. I still have to watch Bad Batch, but I am pretty caught up. I've seen Clone Wars. I've seen this now. I've seen Rebels. So I'm excited for more Star Wars content in the future. Ahsoka season 2 as well. So what are you guys excited for in the Star Wars world? You think Andor is #1 show? I got Andor #1 show, guys. I don't know. I think eventually maybe I'll make a Andor or a show tier list once I'm caught up in everything else. But this has been a blast. Andor has been a blast. Great ending to the show. Great show overall. So excited about that and hope you guys share the same excitement. So that'll wrap up Andor season 2, wrap up the Andor coverage on the channel. Unfortunately, I didn't have the pods for season 1, and there's too many characters for me to do tier list. So we'll leave that Andor here, but expect me to be covering more shows in the future. Right now, my non-live show I'm watching is Dark, so expect a very in-depth analysis because that show's fucking crazy. Besides that, Survivor wrapped up last week, and we have movie reviews for Deer Hunter and more in the future. I've done a bunch in the past because this is coming out in the future. I'm going to be on vacation when this comes out, so subscribe, like, drop a comment, drop a dislike, hit the bell to be notified whenever I post a video, and yeah, so with that, be easy, y'all.